Today, more than 70 congressional Democrats are calling for President Trump to be removed from office, either through impeachment or by his cabinet invoking the 25th Amendment. More than a quarter of congressional Democrats are questioning Trump's mental fitness after he threatened that Iran's whole civilization will die. And while reaction from sitting Republican lawmakers has been muted, Senator Lisa Murkowski issued a statement saying Trump's threat cannot be excused. So, Michael, where are we in this debate over Trump's fitness, and has the ceasefire announcement changed anything?
Yeah, Chris, certainly not for Democrats, right? Beforehand, as you mentioned yesterday, as the president's threats were playing out on Truth Social, we heard from dozens of Democrats who said that the president needed to be removed, whether that be through impeachment, whether that be through the 25th Amendment, both extremely high bars to clear. But just zeroing in on the 25th Amendment first, that would require a majority of the cabinet and the vice president to declare the president unfit for office. And then if the president objected, but the cabinet and the vice president wanted to go through with their belief, it would require at least 2/3 of both the House and the Senate to believe that the president is unfit for office.
Hey, what is going on, everyone? Washington just crossed into territory that has no map, no precedent, and absolutely no guardrails. Serious members of Congress are now calling for Trump's immediate arrest, not removal, not the orderly process of impeachment. Arrest, handcuffs, custody, right now. Because as far as these lawmakers are concerned, every other option has been tried, every legal defense has collapsed, and every political ally has walked out the door.
All right, let's also tell you how President Donald Trump has announced a ceasefire with Iran, claiming a complete victory. But this announcement has done very little to silence the growing calls from the Democrats for his removal. More than 85 Democrat lawmakers have now called for President Trump to be impeached or removed via the 25th Amendment. And most of these calls were triggered by Trump's threat to bomb Iran and end a whole civilization. That's the post he put out yesterday. Lawmakers Sree Thanedar and Jasmine Crockett sent letters to Vice President J.D. Vance and the cabinet asking to remove Trump by invoking the 25th Amendment to the Constitution. Representative John Larson, on the other hand, introduced articles of impeachment against Trump. However, just before the end of the deadline to act on his threat, Donald Trump announced the 2-week truce with Iran. But several House Democrats made clear their calls for Trump's removal still stand despite this agreement.
We have reached a point where impeachment is no longer the ceiling. We have reached a point where political disagreement is not even the frame anymore. We have reached a moment where actual members of Congress are standing on the floor of the United States Capitol demanding the sitting president be placed in handcuffs. And I mean that with zero exaggeration. Not removed, not censured, not asked politely to step down, arrested, right now, while he is still in the Oval Office. These demands are not coming from the fringes. They are coming from multiple lawmakers who are done waiting for the system to catch up to the severity of what they are watching.
Over 30 congressional Democrats are calling on the cabinet to remove President Donald Trump from office over his threats to escalate the war in Iran and target civilian infrastructure. The calls come after Trump wrote on Truth Social Tuesday that Iran's, quote, whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again, if Tehran doesn't agree to a deal with the United States. Democrats say that the threat, if carried out, amounts to a war crime that would punish the people of Iran for actions of its government. The 25th Amendment allows for a president to transfer power voluntarily if they're unable to perform the duties of their office.
And here is the thing. The arrest demands are picking up bipartisan support. That is not a small detail. That is the detail that changes the political math entirely, because Trump has run out of moves. He has run out of allies willing to absorb the damage. He has run out of legal arguments that any court is still taking seriously. And the only question left on the table now is whether the federal government has both the legal authority and the political will to arrest a sitting president. That question is no longer hypothetical.
Post. The president says Iran must agree, quote, to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz. Going on to write, if that happens, he'll, quote, suspend bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. U.S. Representative Jim McGovern writing, quote, so he'll stop bombing Iran in order to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, which was open before he started bombing Iran. Got it. U.S. Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut saying, quote, it appears Trump just agreed to give Iran control of the Strait of Hormuz, a history-changing win for Iran. The level of incompetence is both stunning.
And here is what makes this even harder to wrap your head around. The arrest demands are not coming from the backbench. They are not coming from some first-term representative in a safe district looking for a viral moment. These are coming from members with actual institutional power, members who sit on committees, members who understand the constitutional weight of what they are asking for, and they have done the political calculation anyway. They have looked at Trump, looked at his threats, looked at what he posted on Truth Social about an entire civilization dying, and they have concluded that he is not just a political problem, he is an immediate danger. And that conclusion is driving them toward a word that is never applied to a sitting president in American history: arrest.
But minutes after Trump's announcement, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez renewed her calls for Trump to be impeached, saying that the Republican president's announcement on a temporary ceasefire changes nothing. She's claimed that President has threatened a genocide and that he must be removed from office, whether by his cabinet or the Congress. Others echoed her sentiments as well. Lawmakers Melanie Stansberry wrote, and I quote, "Just because the president announces he's agreed to a 2-week ceasefire moments before he threatened to commit war crimes does not mean he's suddenly fit to serve." Senator Ed Markey, meanwhile, welcomed the ceasefire but added that Trump cannot simply threaten war crimes. He urged the Congress to get back in session now to stop this war and remove Donald Trump.
Think about what that actually means. If Congress concludes that the president needs to be removed before a Senate trial can even finish, if the Secret Service is given orders that no administration in this country's history has ever had to process, if federal agents are told to walk into the Oval Office and take the President of the United States into custody, that is not the plot of a political thriller. That is not a hypothetical for a constitutional law class. That is the conversation happening in real congressional offices right now. And the people having it are not fringe voices. They are not backbench representatives looking for a viral moment. They are lawmakers with committee assignments, institutional memory, and a very clear understanding of what they are asking for. That is what makes this different from every other crisis point in the last 4 years. And here is why this moment is different from every other time we thought we had reached the edge. Trump has not just run into political resistance. He has run into institutional resistance across every single branch simultaneously. His approval is in the basement. Judges are moving against him. His own party's most senior voices are either silent or walking toward the exit. He threatened that an entire civilization would die. Then he announced a 2-week ceasefire minutes before his own deadline expired. Translation, he blinked. And every serious person watching that sequence of events knows exactly what it means. It means the threats are not strategy anymore. They are desperation. And desperate presidents in the final stages of institutional collapse are the most dangerous version of the problem, not the least. Let me be honest with you for a second. I hate what is happening to this country right now. I actually hate it. But here is why that feeling matters less than what we do with it. Because here is the thing that the arrest demands are actually telling us, if you know how to read the signal. They are not primarily about whether federal agents are going to physically walk into the Oval Office this week. They are about the constitutional architecture that gets activated once a president exhausts every other option. And Trump has now exhausted most of them. He cannot survive a Senate conviction vote if his own party's senators start calculating that removal is less damaging to them than the alternative. He cannot win in court because judges, including judges he appointed, have been consistent. He cannot negotiate his way out because there is genuinely nobody left at the table with both the authority and the willingness to cut a deal. He cannot appeal to the public because the polling has collapsed in ways that make normal political recovery basically impossible on the timeline he is working with. He cannot threaten his way out because every new threat just makes the next round of institutional actors more determined to move against him. So what is actually left? That is the question that is driving the arrest conversation. Not whether it is logistically simple, whether it is the only door that has not been closed yet. Now let us be precise about something, because this is the part that most coverage is getting wrong. Arrest of a sitting president while he still controls the executive branch is almost certainly not feasible in a practical sense. You cannot arrest someone who controls the Secret Service and the FBI and every federal law enforcement agency simultaneously. That is not a legal argument. That is just physics. What the arrest demands are actually doing, what they are designed to do, is something more strategic than that. They are sending a message to Senate Republicans. That message is, do your constitutional duty right now, use the process that exists, vote for conviction and removal, or watch this escalate into something that makes a Senate trial look orderly and civilized by comparison. Those are the actual choices on the table. and the arrest demands make the second option visible in a way that a normal impeachment debate does not. When lawmakers stand on the floor and say arrest, they are not describing a logistics plan. They are describing the alternative universe that opens up if the Senate fails to act. And that alternative universe is genuinely worse for everyone, including Senate Republicans, than doing the hard thing now. Here is what has led to this specific moment, because we did not just wake up one morning with Congress demanding the arrest of the president. This is the culmination of a specific sequence. Trump came back into office with every structural advantage available to a president. He had his party. He had the courts. He had the executive branch fully under his control. He had a base that was still energized. And then, over the course of a few months, all of it collapsed in sequence. Approval numbers fell. Courts pushed back. His own party started doing the political math and did not like what they found. And then came the Truth Social post, threatening that an entire civilization would die. That single post did something that months of policy fights had not managed to do. It gave the arrest conversation a specific factual anchor. Lawmakers are not just saying Trump is dangerous in the abstract. They are pointing at a specific document, a specific date, a specific threat, and saying, this is the evidence. Lawmakers Sree Thanedar and Jasmine Crockett sent letters to Vice President Vance and the cabinet. Representative John Larson introduced articles of impeachment. Senator Ed Markey called for Congress to get back in session immediately. These are not symbolic gestures. These are institutional actors activating the mechanisms that exist for exactly this kind of moment. And this is the part that should worry everyone. Trump has systematically removed every person around him who might have counseled restraint. Every advisor who said slow down. Every lawyer who said you cannot do that. Every staffer who understood where the constitutional lines are. They have all been purged or pushed out. So now Trump is operating inside an information environment populated entirely by people who tell him what he wants to hear. And that makes the behavior more unpredictable, not less. That makes the institutional response more urgent, not less. Because when a president loses access to honest feedback and surrounds himself only with loyalists, the feedback loop that normally provides some break on the worst impulses is gone. And you are left with a president who is capable of announcing a ceasefire and a civilization-ending threat in the same 48-hour window and apparently seeing no contradiction between them. The other thing driving the arrest demands, the thing that does not get enough attention, is the genuine fear about what happens in the final days if Trump believes removal is coming and decides he has nothing left to lose. Will he invoke the Insurrection Act? Will he deploy the military in ways that create facts on the ground before any court can respond? Will he pardon himself and his allies in a single afternoon? Will he destroy evidence? These are not paranoid scenarios. These are the scenarios that actual lawmakers with actual security clearances are gaming out in actual conversations. And when those scenarios are on the table, when the concern is not just that Trump is governing badly, but that he might take actions in his final period in office that cause damage that outlasts his presidency by decades, then the urgency of the removal timeline becomes the central question. Not whether removal is warranted, whether it is fast enough. That is not just overreach. That is a threat to the constitutional order that the framers specifically designed impeachment to address. Let that sink in for a second. The mechanism that exists for this situation is being used for this situation. And the arrest demands are the signal that if that mechanism moves too slowly, or if the Senate refuses to engage it seriously, then the people most alarmed about what they are watching are going to start looking for every other tool available to them. That is what institutional desperation looks like from the inside. And we are watching it in real time. Now, here is the thing I want you to hold on to, because I do not want to leave you in pure alarm without something to anchor to. The fact that Thanedar and Crockett and Larson and Markey are doing what they are doing is not just noise. It is signal. It is proof that the institutional immune response is still functioning. It is proof that there are people inside the system who have not calculated their way into silence, who have looked at what is in front of them and decided that their job is to use every tool available rather than wait for someone else to go first. That is not nothing. In a moment like this, that is actually everything. The question of whether democratic institutions survive extreme stress is not answered by the institutions themselves in the abstract. It is answered by the specific people inside them who decide to act when acting is uncomfortable and uncertain and possibly costly to their own careers. We know some of those people by name right now. We need more of them. But the affirmative vision here has to be proportionate to the level of alarm, and I am not going to pretend it is not serious. What we are actually fighting for in this moment is specific and nameable. We are fighting for the proposition that the constitutional mechanisms that exist for exactly this kind of crisis are actually used, that the Senate takes its role in the impeachment process seriously, rather than treating it as a political calculation, that the judiciary continues to function independently regardless of the pressure being applied to it, and that the lawmakers who are raising the alarm right now are not left standing alone. That is the concrete vision. Not democracy in the abstract, those specific things, those specific processes, those specific people doing their specific jobs. So where does that leave us? The arrest demands are accelerating the removal conversation. They are putting pressure on Trump. They are putting pressure on Senate Republicans. They are creating a sense of urgency that a normal impeachment timeline does not generate on its own. They are making clear to everyone watching that this is an endgame situation, that the constitutional order is being tested at a level it has not been tested before, and that the outcome is genuinely uncertain. Can the system handle a president who is willing to operate outside its norms while still technically inside its structures? Can the removal process move fast enough to prevent the damage that a desperate president in his final days might cause? Can the Senate Republicans who know what the right vote is find the spine to cast it before the alternative becomes unavoidable? Those are not rhetorical questions. Those are the questions that are actually being discussed at the highest levels of government right now, and the answers are not settled. The answers are being written in real time by the specific people who decide what to do in the next few days and weeks. We are about to find out whether the line holds, or whether we are already in the kind of constitutional moment that reshapes what American democracy looks like on the other side. That answer is going to determine everything. And I want to be direct with you about one more thing before we close this out. The reason this channel exists, the reason we do this every time something breaks, is because the gap between what is actually happening and what most people understand is happening has never been wider. The arrest demands are not a stunt. The constitutional mechanisms being invoked are not theater. The lawmakers standing up right now are not performing for cameras. They are doing the hardest kind of political work there is, which is acting on principle in a moment when the personal cost of doing so is real and visible and not going away. What you can do right now, today, is understand what is actually at stake, share this with someone who needs the context, and stay in this fight with us as it develops, because this story is not over. Not even close. The next vote, the next court ruling, the next decision made behind closed doors in the Senate is going to matter enormously, and you need to be paying attention when it happens.